Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started since it is now 8:06. Thank you for coming to our session on 8 o'clock on the last day of the conference. Our session is called, let me get rid of that, The Key to Success, a three-pronged approach to bringing state associations to the next level. We did have a Hoover poll, and we had almost 200 people answer the poll, but obviously we have many less people here. So we'll just introduce ourselves, and maybe we'll just ask each of you to just tell us who you are, what organization you represent, what state you're from. My name is Anthony Mangiafico. I am the Program Director for Wallingford Adult Ed in Connecticut. I'm also the President of our state association, which is CASE, the Connecticut Association for Adult and Continuing Education. This is now my 12th year in adult education, and we're going to talk to you about how we grew CASE from a good organization to a great organization. And yesterday we actually won the Sally Award, so we're very proud of that. Thank you. And we'll let Kristen go next.
Hi, I'm Kristen Hempel. This is also my 12th year in adult education, and it's my third year, I think, as the director of my program in Northeastern Connecticut. It's a regional program, and I have been on the board for COABE now for about 5 years as the Region 1 rep and transitioning into the Director of Leadership position with this new strategic plan. I'm very excited to be here. I've worked with CASE for a number of years, and just personally believe very strongly in the power of grassroots, connecting and communicating well with leadership at a variety of different levels, and just the power of what we can do when we have those conversations. And I think that's a thread that's going to come through this presentation today. I also want to give a quick shout out to Larry Covino, who is our administrator, our executive director for CASE, and so we appreciate him being here to correct any information we give you that's wrong.
So how about if you just take a minute, just tell us your name, what your role is, and what organization you represent. Maybe we'll start with over here on the right. Okay, thank you.
I want to know more about where you live, but we'll talk later. I grew up in Woodstock, and my brother lives in Starkville, so I love Vermont. So glad to have you here. Wonderful, welcome.
All right, thank you.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Welcome. Okay.
They haven't had many events or things like that, so that kind of stirred me to say, well, we got to do something. So
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Sounds like a big job.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Rick Reno, as they said, Executive Director for the Connecticut Association for Adult Continuing Education. Prior to that, I was the Director of Local Program in Connecticut. I am also a recovering administrator. Spent several years as the principal of the alternative high school in our community. So that was wild ride through COVID. And now I'm just here to learn and absorb as much as I can over the last 3 days, and it's been a great experience. I'm Katie Donago. I am the Executive Director of the English Listening Center, which is a community-based organization in Salt Lake City, Utah. So in that role, I run an adult English language learning program, and truly it's complete tradition. I've done so well to do that. I will continue doing that. But I've also been tasked with helping the state association revive. I wanted to put it that way. There were some leadership changes and name changes, and there's not a lot of activity with the association right now. So I've being moved into that because of my experience running a nonprofit, transferring those skills to the state association, and I'm also a fellow in over 5.
All right, thank you, everyone.
So we may have been having a little bit too much fun when we were making these slides. But we wanted to talk about these 3 different phases, really, of CASE's growth and development. And Anthony was like, well, they're clearly eras. And so, yeah, we went down the rabbit hole. You're going to have to just come along with us. But as we look at these eras, we're going to really be following that thread of the development of the executive committee, the board responsibilities, our volunteer engagement, as well as the paid staff. And you're going to see how it's the balance between those 3 elements that changed at different times and needed to change at different times, but came together in the end with a 3-pronged approach that we're really proud of. So. Oh, this is me as well. All right, so I'm starting it off. I need to put this up higher. I'll stand over here.
You want to switch?
Okay.
I'll take this.
All right, there we go. All right, I didn't do well with the microphone yesterday up here. Is this better? Okay, that does look like it's working. All right, so we started in, all right, sorry, my slides are out of order.
Yeah, I think this is my side, actually, so if you want to switch?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, so CASE was established in 1989. We are a nonprofit of 501c3. Back then, before 2016, we had about 62 organizations. It fluctuated slightly from year to year. And the board is made up mainly of K-12 certified staff. In Connecticut, adulthood is under the K-12 system. I know it's different in every single state. And the board is pretty much only K-12 adult ed directors, no community partners. And we met every single month in New Haven, which is, I think if you know Connecticut, New Haven, South Central area. And things went really well for a long time. We met monthly, we planned the conference, planned other things, and things didn't really change much because they didn't need to. So we had several committees back then. We had membership and nominations, public policy, and so on. The executive board met twice a year, so the full board met monthly, and the executive board only met twice a year. And then the conference committee was always our biggest committee. That's true now as well. And in terms of terms, we all have 1-year terms, the executive board, president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. There are no term limits. And we don't do things like president-elect. COAB does that. Some of your state organizations might do that. We have a president and vice president. The board members are all 3-year terms, and they're staggered, so about a third of the board is up for re-election every single year. And again, there are no term limits for anyone on the board. So during our 1989 era, we didn't really have many volunteers except for the board members. The board members pretty much did everything. The one opportunity that we had for volunteers was at our conference. So our conference, we obviously needed a lot more people than just our board. So we had the same program staff our registration table because they were local. We had proctors that would assist the presenters in each of their sessions. We always have raffle baskets. So of course we need someone to run that table, and then someone to set up for the conference and breakdown. But outside of the conference, there were really no other volunteer opportunities, unless you were actually on the board. And most of the conference planning was all board members. So the actual conference, we did have volunteers, but for planning the conference, it was all board members. So we did have paid staff back then in this era, 1989. Ellen was our first program administrator. She was not full-time. I don't think she was even part-time. I think she was just a stipend position. And it was mainly for administrative tasks, keeping tabs of membership, helping with conference registrations and invoicing. And we also had, she was a former adult ed director. We also had a paid lobbyist at the time and an accountant. So we still have that accountant, but we have gotten rid of the paid lobbyist since then. And I'll turn over to Kristen.
And then in 2016, we started to see a shift. A lot of our directors were talking about retirement. And so we were looking at this, strong, a strong group with institutional memory, but we knew we were coming up to a time of change. There were also some other things going on in our education world at that point that were shifting. We were having new expectations around teacher evaluation. There was also a lot of shift in focus at the state level in terms of switching to really digging in onto MSGs in some different ways and some other initiatives that they were pushing out. So this was a time of change for us. And so the more dynamic environment meant that we needed to think about things a little bit differently. The expectations for programs and for program administrators in their programs was shifting. We also came to the realization that we just needed to be a little bit more flexible in how we approach things and able to shift a little bit more quickly. So part of what happened during this time is we also had some consolidation of programs, right? I said that some of the expectations around programs were increasing, so that meant some of these smaller programs. We had a lot of little tiny programs around the state. They started to come together. There was some more regionalization. We also realized, okay, in order to make this work, if we're now looking at doing more IETs, then we need to actually talk to some people who are out in the field doing these occupational work. And so we started to develop stronger relationships with our workforce development board. Some regions were able to get in the room a little quicker than others, and we talked about how we were doing that. We shared our process and our resources and encouraged and lifted each other up when we were not so welcomed. But we started with those collaborations. And so, that said, we were definitely in a bit of an identity crisis because, we were all educators and adult educators sitting around the table, and this was our place to make decisions. And now we're saying, okay, should we be including these other voices and bringing other people to the table if they're not educators? But we did it, and we were very excited with the results. You'll see here, the structure of our meetings started to shift. We also danced a little bit with the community college representation and started to talk about how we had better relationships with our CBOs. So during this period of time, as all of this is going on, we realized we wanted to do more outreach, both for our learners and trying to get them aware of and engaged with our program. But we also, as I said, we're trying to build these relationships. So we needed to get out in front and create a more public identity for our organization. So we actually pooled some resources, worked on a little logo, Learn to Earn. We got some partners to help support that work, and started to think about, okay, how do we play in this larger space? Because we were also now looking at hiring, or continuing to hire. So part of what we did was we shifted from this retired, smaller part-time. Is that the next slide? I'm clearly moving around on my slides. I think I dropped them on the floor, so I apologize. But anyways, so we worked, we have a stronger personnel committee that became more involved because we started expanding our staff as well. And we came together, and as you're doing those kinds of things, you need to start looking at your bylaws and those pieces. So part of what we did here in terms of volunteers, we realized we needed to have more tech savvy people coming in. We couldn't just rely on the skill set that we already had. And as positions, I said, we're getting turned over, we started to come together and reach out about how to lift up our voices across the state. So one of those examples is this No Excuses March that we had in 2019. We had gone ahead with this marketing campaign, and we saw people getting energized, but we also needed to get feet out on the ground. And so we all got together in New Haven, and we marched down the main road there, people from around the state, and we said, there's no excuses, you got to get back to education. And so we started to really create those relationships between programs and the teachers, the support staff, all of that. We also started looking more intentionally for volunteers for other projects like the marketing piece. So we did have a shift in terms of paid staff, which I referenced earlier. So we moved from having just that one administrator to having someone who became a program administrator. So David Downs had been a regional rep for COABE. He was a past administrator in the state. He had that institutional knowledge. He had a passion for public policy and for advocacy. So what we did was we said, okay, we're going to eliminate the lobbyist position that we had a small contract with a local lobbyist, and we beefed up this program administrator position. But we still needed some administrative tasks, and so we had a couple people at different points that would help with putting together our in-person workshops, and again, all those different administrative tasks. These are their essential job descriptions here. So you can get a sense of the range of things, but we, again, really wanted that program administrator to have a face that was out there and on the Hill, able to have those conversations, and also able to get into some of those other rooms where nonprofits were getting together and talking about all the things that impact our learners. Because as I said, we realized we can't just talk about education, we need to talk about the barriers and how do we engage with partners in those conversations too.
So then we had another shift in 2023. We were still coming out of COVID. Things were just different. Remote learning, remote meetings, those are the norm. They still are. Look at what we're doing right here today. And the board capacity decreased. They could not do as much as they were doing in the past because of COVID protocols and everything else they had to do in their own districts. So we realized that we needed to do something different because we just couldn't do it anymore. Plus, the woman who was the chair of our conference committee for 9 years said basically she didn't want to do it anymore. So after 9 years, that's a long time, because being chair of the conference committee, she was working weekends, nights, mornings. It was a ton of work. And as hard as I tried, I was president during this time, to find someone to replace her, no one wanted to do it. So, we needed to get paid staff to do some of the work around CASE. And we also needed to do more around advocacy. It's one thing just to call your mayor or, get a proclamation, but we needed to do something more substantial, and we just couldn't do it ourselves anymore. We needed more paid help. And also we had some retirements during this time, so some people that were on the board were stepping down, and we had a lot of new people coming on that didn't have that institutional knowledge that others might have had. So we decided, this is our board now, and then I'll tell you what we decided to do. So this is our current board makeup. It is, as you can see, more heavily female than male. Different ethnicities. Our biggest age group is at 45 to 54, which makes sense. We're all administrators in Connecticut. We have 21 board members, and we have 52 organizations. So we have less organizations now than we did in the 1989 era. But as Kristen mentioned, because in Connecticut, almost every single town had their own adult ed program, and that just is not sustainable anymore. For example, in Wallingford, we took over Berlin Adult Ed. Berlin, the year before I took it over, had 19 students. So it's really not efficient to have a program with 19 students when That director has to go to all the same meetings that I have to go to. You know, they have to get students ready for workforce and digital literacy and so on. So you're going to see more and more consolidation in Connecticut. So something we started or enhanced during this time was a social media committee. As you know, social media is great, and we need to be on there constantly, you know, daily posting. So Larry put together a social media committee with the social media contacts of all the adult ed programs. We also never really did much around Adult Ed and Family Literacy Week. So over the past 2 years, we have a committee that plans for those activities for that week, because that's obviously a big deal, and the board can't do it by themselves. We also are pushing student ambassador training and student leadership training. This past March, so 3 weeks ago, we had our annual conference in Connecticut, and for the first time, we invited students to our conference, and that was really fantastic. I think we had about 12 or 13 students, and that was great to see. And then whenever we need something else done, like making a strategic plan, we put together an ad hoc committee now. And also, we're committed to all the COABE initiatives, Sally, SAFE, Digital Change Agent, and so on. I was part of the first Sally cohort, Larry was part of the third one. We're looking for someone to do the next cohort. And then let's go to... So our board now is not only K-12 administrators, it is comprised of also people from the workforce boards. We have someone from a library, a community college, and we have literacy volunteers. So again, we wanted to broaden that reach because our students need multiple resources, so we wanted to get different representation on that board. The executive committee still meets monthly, and then the full board meets 4 times a year. We used to meet monthly, but it was hard to get quorum sometimes. So we meet 4 times a year, twice in person, twice remotely. So now that we have these committees, these additional committees, there's more opportunities for people to get involved. So for the conference committee, it's not just the board planning the entire conference, we have more volunteers on the conference now, conference committee. And those other committees, social media, Adult Ed and Family Literacy Week, are comprised of a lot of different volunteers that are not board members. They're not even administrators. It might be teachers, people from the State Department of Ed. We really want a broader field of expertise, and also just more people helping because, like I mentioned before, the board just couldn't do all the work anymore. Let's see. And again, a big push on advocacy, and advocacy needs to happen from every single level. Larry, want to say something? Yes. Actually, can I give you the mic?
Can I just ask for what's one thing missing there? Thank you, students. And I just want to point out that is something that the board has recognized, and we are now recruiting students for our board as well, because we realized about a year ago that that was a missing piece. And we're working and we're looking to provide stipends for students so they can attend the meetings, if for nothing else, to cover their mileage and their time that they're there. But we need their voice as well. And I think that's something that in the coming year will elevate our organization even more going forward.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Larry. So as I mentioned, we have more opportunities for volunteers, and speaking of students, like Larry just mentioned, we don't have any students even on our other committees, but that's something that we've been talking about, just trying to figure out how we make it work, because obviously our students are busy, they have families, they have jobs, and so on, but I'm sure there's a way that we can figure it out. So paid staff. So during this time, we decided to reallocate some of our budget. So we raised the conference fees. Well, for 3 years, we were totally remote from 2020 to 2022. So we came back to in-person conference. We raised the fees on that. We also collect annual dues, so we raised our dues. And we decided that we needed a full-time executive director. So we collapsed the 2 positions we had. They were both stipend positions. And we created a full-time executive director, who is now Larry, who is now in his 2nd year of being our executive director. So that role entails being the face of CASE, so going to meetings, meeting with the State Department of Ed, mentoring new directors, because again, we still have a lot of new directors that are entering the field right now. As I mentioned, our conference committee chair decided that she didn't want to do it after 9 years, so Larry is now in charge of the conference. He's the chair of the committee, but again, there's a lot of people that help and support him during that time. Just updating our program lists, monthly newsletter. Applying for grants is something we've been doing for a while. It's really tough because we don't serve students directly, and a lot of the grants that we're looking at, you need to serve students directly. So we're trying to figure out ways to find different grants. Thank you. Someone else just mentioned that they don't serve students directly, so it's a challenge to apply for grants. Building partnerships. So, we, as all of us, we do partner with our workforce boards. Sometimes it's partner in name only. Some regions in Connecticut have a really tight connection, some do not. So we're working on that, and Larry's been fostering that as well. And again, that advocacy piece is huge, especially with what is happening right now in Washington. We're trying to make sure that the focus is on adult ed, on the students, not on the politics, because right now WIOA is a question mark. Our funding might be, another question mark. So Larry makes sure that our student stories are front and center on our social media, on our website, and whenever he's advocating for the field. And then we also hired, I think this is in July of 2024, our treasurer, who had been our case board treasurer for years and years, I'm not even sure how long because she's been there longer than I have been, retired. And again, no one wanted to be our case treasurer. So we decided to keep Lori on as a stipend position. So she's now our treasurer / bookkeeper. So she's paid a stipend for that. Does all the finances, creates the budget. Of course, she has board oversight. And then she's also heavily involved in the conference. As you would imagine, there's a big amount of work around the conference, registration, invoicing. We have exhibitors. This year we had our highest number of exhibitors we've ever had. I think we had 30 or so, 32. So again, making sure that they're all paid up and so on. So she is now our paid stipend position. And then we still do have that paid account because it's very important that we have all our books and paperwork in order. So that's how our paid positions work right now. And Kristen.
So as we talk about CASE right now, we're continuing to grow, right? We said that we needed to be flexible. We said that we need to be responsive. And so I think that the example actually about student involvement is a great example because we're constantly looking to continue to develop and grow the people in our community. So we started this year with a second round. We did our first round of leadership training a number of years ago where we brought several programs together and we paid for a credit diploma class for learners to learn about advocacy. Then we pivoted, and this year we had learners come to our conference. And so from this group, and I brought some learners here last year, and so from this group we're starting to build out the base of our learners and continue to bring them forward into new spaces. But I think part of what we're talking about here is how you stage that, how you triage it, because we want to have those connections with people across the environment, but we don't want to throw anyone in over their head. So, as those first conversations with the workforce boards where we're sitting in the back of the room and we're just allowed to be in the space and hear what they're talking about, to those conversations where now they're calling us up and saying, hey, what do you think about this? I want to do a training, can you come in? It's about being constantly present and slowly increasing your expectations for your partners and for your members. So that for us right now, we came together, this year we worked on our mission, we rewrote our mission, we've continued to do some consolidation around the state in terms of the number of organizations. As I said, we've continued to reach out and expand the number of partners that we have, but also work on increasing the depth of those partnerships so that we can continue to speak with a united voice so that we can really have our programs succeed and our students thrive. All of this is hard if you don't have any money, right? And, Anthony talked about increasing the cost of the conference, but, as our number of organizations were shrinking, we also needed to look back at our dues structure. So this is our dues structure. We'll open the room later and have a conversation, and if you all, I'd be curious about your structures around the country. We pull these numbers from our program profile, so from our LACES database, we report how many staff are in each program, but we keep looking at it, and people are finding it worth it. Part of that is because we do provide a number of different benefits for our members, including the COABE membership and pro-literacy memberships, but we also do a lot of that mentoring and support. We provide that professional learning opportunities for the leaders in the programs, and discounts to our conferences, networking opportunities, all those different things. And there really is a benefit to having that full-time director, because you know that even when you're in your program knee-deep and trying to make sure that the doors stay open and all that, you do have some other voice that can go out there and represent you. Take care of business. So in terms of accomplishments and systems and strategies, we have done a lot of work around advocacy. And that's part of one of those feeder systems that we use for volunteer opportunities. I think advocacy is a great way because you can give people just a small little task, right? So you ask people to do something once, just post this on your social media, just come to this one event. And then next time you ask them to do 2 tasks. And I don't know about you, but once you've, tasted the Kool-Aid of, advocating for adult education, and you become more and more excited about it. And that's been a lot of how we've done that. We have people with a range of availabilities, and so having those opportunities that are small, but also saying, okay, you've invested that 5 minutes, but how about this opportunity that takes a little bit more time and energy? We just kind of hook them in and then roll with it. But part of it is also that we've been scanning our programs, constantly scanning for innovation and creativity and good resources. And people are so, they get motivated also when they get that positive feedback. And so when we're able to pull them in and we see them doing something great at the program level, then we're asking them to come and talk to us about it on the state level, and continuing to promote that and develop them, right? I said before that we do a lot of leadership development, and that really has been a pivot for us. Originally, when we were doing our professional development sessions, in one of those first eras, we were mostly focused on the program directors, but we've continued now to look at, curriculum directors, career navigators, other people who are leaders in their program, the people who are, working with students and building out their leadership programs, so that we can provide them with leadership development as well. We have also done a lot of work in terms of accessing the free resources that we do have. So if I heard we have 2 safes in the room, was that right? So I think that is going to be an amazing program for you, and it's both the content that you get from it and the network, and that's part of what we have invested in as well. In terms of Sally, I would encourage you to look at that program and access their guidance, because it was through some of their guidance that we went back into our bylaws again, and we continued to update that. We also leaned on them for help in terms of creating a new strategic plan. And then, a conflict of interest form, and leaning in on the fiscal policy. We're still small. We can't do it all. And so using those resources that we have at the national level makes a big difference and allows us to invest our time in the things that are going on in our state, instead of trying to hack some things together. But we've also, through those opportunities, been able to network with other associations and hear how things are done in different locations. Now, sometimes it's not something we can do, and it's unique to those environments, but it's also been a really powerful opportunity for us to play out new ideas and get out of our own way in terms of thinking about what can happen in Connecticut. And I'll just use myself as an example here. when Anthony was like, I think that we should go for a paid executive director. I was like, no way. That's a lot of money. How are we going to do this? It's crazy. And he's like, well, they did it in Michigan. And so, well, okay, well, let's figure out how they did that there, because we need to keep listening to each other in order to advance our voices. So, actually, I'm going to go back to this one. So we've been talking a little bit about the three prongs, but I just want to say one more thing about that, is that we do all have our roles to play, right? So we have this executive committee and the case board, and their role is to set vision and to have their ears out about what's happening in our programs and in our state. But then we have these volunteers, and we're looking at them as really being engaged in targeted, initiative-driven activities. So it may be those small things, but it may also be the task force to plan our AFLA week. It may be the task force to come together and figure out how the heck do we do social media. And then it may be, okay, a smaller group that then sustains that vision. But then we have the paid staff who are able to be out there and do the daily work. And so that's part of how we're looking at how all of this goes together. And that way we're able to invest resources in all three of those areas. And by resources, I mean time, I mean money, I mean training, I mean support. So this is how the three prongs fit together. And you'll see that there's this communication and dialogue that goes along with all of them. Like I said, the board is setting those priorities and the recruitment and direction, feeding that into the volunteers who then are doing all that support and legwork, ideas and skills. And then we're going over to the staff, and they're trying to keep us all together, right? Take those visions and ideas from the board, and also bring in the volunteers to make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction. But it's those combinations that allows us to develop the leadership skills, increase the visibility, have strong advocacy and professional development. This is also part of how we've had a diversity of focus areas. It allows people, with our volunteers to bring in skills that we don't necessarily have on our board or on our staff. And so we learn from them, but we also just lean into that and say, thank you for sharing that. And let's, how can we work together and let you run? Part of what's happening here is that we are continually building and refining the tools that we have. We've learned that we can't say, well, this is how we did it last year, or this is how we've done it for 10 years. We've got to keep looking at it. And that part of all of this system, the reason they're all the arrows, is because it does involve that constant communication, because the volunteers are going to be coming to you with a, did you think about this? Or, I learned how to do this in school. What about how that could look at a board level? So we are casting a wider net. We are growing and investing and increasing our commitment. And I will, again, emphasize the importance of those co-wave tools and doing all of that. So we wanted to open up and hear a little bit about the programs that you're with. And some of you said you have state associations already up and running. Can you share a little bit about what your state association is like in terms of your organization?
So in Vermont, we have the AELN network, which is an adult ed and literacy network that we've put together with the other state agencies. So in Vermont State, we have 4 independent nonprofits that all do adult ed across the state. Vermont Adult Learning, who I represent here, is in 7 of those counties, but we found a need to really advocate at the state level and in pooling resources for things like the applications we use. We pool together our resources to be able to get TABE tests and seats in essential education for TABE Academy, GD Academy, those types of things. So we've created this network in order to not just pool our resources in terms of funding and monetary means, but also in our skills and coming together. So there are people from each agency represented in the network, and then we also hired a lobbyist to advocate at the state level. Vermont is also currently going through a change in our high school completion program into an adult diploma program because of some of the inadequacies of the old system. For instance, it used to be that you'd have to have a TABE level 5 to even get into the high school completion program to earn a diploma, which obviously is not fair or equitable for the students. So we've advocated for that. That has changed through legislation, which is also changing funding, among other things. So we're very new to it, so we're trying to find other great examples across the country of, how are we making this work? How are you guys working with your agencies and your governments and your other agencies like Department of Labor and your other WIOA partners and things like that, in endeavors to try to be more equitable for the students and really advocate for them. Because one thing I've learned here is most states go by the federal level of level 5 on the tape to earn a diploma, and or level 4 rather, and we're at a 5. I mean, that's the Vermont exceptionalism for you. We're better than everybody else. Well, no, you're just making it much harder for students when that's not necessary. I mean, the high school equivalency is a 4, which is a 536 on a scale score, and yet they make us get a 620 in order to graduate a student with a diploma. And then ways to prove it, they make us do all the tests. So to prove that we have the science or social studies skills, we have to do the GD, which their equivalency is a 4, but yet we have to do a 5 on the reading and language or the math. And it's just, yeah, we're struggling, but examples like this is gonna help us get down that road. We're probably back in the 1989 part of your presentation here. So, but we're working on it, and thanks for all the great examples and ideas.
All right.
I'm in Tennessee, and our association is TACE. We had paid staff and all of that several years ago. People leave, and we, find ourselves, having to restructure and do some of this stuff. Right now, we don't have a paid staff. Everybody's pretty much volunteer basis, but we're trying to pull everything together. I just want to ask you, when you have your list of folks that you try to get on the board, I noticed corrections wasn't on there. Is there a reason for that?
So we actually do have someone from corrections who is on our board. But it's tough because corrections is just so different from every other part of adult ed that I don't really feel like she's that involved with the board. I'm not sure if that's because it doesn't pertain to what she does daily or because of something else. That's a good question, Kristen. I don't know if you have any more insight than I do, but it's just...
I think one of the challenges for corrections in our state is that although in a lot of ways we're a very progressive state, we don't have any real technology access in our prison and jail systems. And we've been doing a lot of work around technology at the board level. So I do think that that's an area we need to go back and do more work on. In our correction system, though, they are doing some excellent work with IETs, vocational villages. And so it's been great to have them at the table this year. I think we probably only had 10 staff from corrections come to our conference. But yeah, we've had someone on the board from corrections now for maybe 7 years. So looking to develop it more.
I just want also to add, before moving to the state, I was a program director and I was a past president for our association. So right now, I'm still currently, on our board. So our state involvement and stuff like that is pretty strong. We do get good support. So I encourage you to, reach out and, talk to your state folks.
All right, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm from Pennsylvania, and I was part of the SALLY program, and I'm new to the board, our state association board, and I've learned so much because I was an adult educator for 16 years, so I was under PACE, as ours, PACE, and we just thought it was a conference you did every year. Like, that's all we knew it as an adult educator. We go to a conference once a year, that's PACE. But now being part of SALLY and the supports that COABE provides, I'm like, we could do so much more. But we're all volunteer. There's only one paid person, and that's, I don't even know what, like, she's like a membership / conference coordinator. And I can tell you she is not paid enough because like it's ongoing every day, like with something new. Like I keep getting emails. What do you think about this for the conference? Like I'm on the conference planning committee. I'm on the fundraising committee. Like I'm on all these committees, but I'm like, I have a job over here that I still have to do. Like PACE isn't my only job, but it looks, from being part of Sally and seeing the things that you have done in your state and New Mexico and things like that, like, well, we need a paid staff. We need paid directors. And, oh, I forgot, they do pay a lobbyist. I've never met the lobbyist, but
no.
we pay a lobbyist, and Cheryl Heister is part of ours. I don't know if you've known her name or not, but she's amazing. She's part of our advocacy. She's the advocacy chair on our board, but she's wonderful, but we're still paying the lobbyist. And our governor did put a substantial increase in his budget proposal for adult education this coming year, which is great, but we don't know if we'll actually get it. So, I mean, I've just learned so much being part of Sally and connecting with all of you. So thank you very much for this presentation. I'm sorry I was late, I was volunteering, but see, I'm always
She
a
was
volunteer.
volunteering.
All right, thank you so much. I sort of mentioned about the lobbyist. So we did have a lobbyist for a number of years with CASE, but when we, during the second era, we had David Downs was our program administrator, and he was very good at keeping track of legislative bills and seeing what was happening. So we felt we didn't need that, so we could shift that funding toward his salary.
I'm not a political person, so that's not my area of expertise. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not a political person, so that's not my area of expertise by any means. So I'm not saying at all that a lobbyist is bad, but I'm just thinking like, okay, if we do get that increase in funding, is that a necessary thing maybe next year? Are they going to listen to me? Maybe not, because I'm just new to everything, but just like thinking outside the box is in, and you guys were all talking about how you have so many different people on your board. Ours are all adult education and it's all volunteer, and so having some of those other voices is really important.
Makes a big difference. And I wanted to say, part of what, with, in terms of following bills, like right now, we're able to get, no, she's next. She's been raising her hand.
Oh, sorry.
But part of what, we can get these reports now about all the bills that are coming in all the time. And because we have these good partnerships with different organizations around the state, we're able to partner with them and leverage their advocacy tools too, right? Larry and I both got some op-eds out this year, in part because of some of those partnerships and getting good feedback from United Way's advocacy team, because we're invested in a similar mission, and so we're able to extend that. So I really would encourage you to look at that and to use other people's tools to get some of the job done. Sorry.
Hi, thanks. I'm Deanna. I'm from New Hampshire, and I'm the co-chair of the New Hampshire Adult Education Directors Alliance. And I put that in air quotes because we're a nascent organization. But before I tell you about it, I wanted to say it was just such a delight to be able to listen to this. I looked like I was late, but I wasn't. I was on the shuttle listening for the beginning part of the session, so I haven't missed a thing. And it's really great because this is fabulous information. So our alliance started in about 2018. Volunteer group of adult educators, directors mostly, realizing that we really needed to develop an independent voice for the field, separate from the Bureau of Adult Education at the state level. And, so we organized, and we drafted some bylaws. We just started set up some regular meetings and became somewhat reactive to what was going on in the field. We're just sort of getting on our feet when COVID hit, knocked us out of the game for about 2 years, and we sort of, reconvened post-COVID. And now we're really struggling with how to identify ourselves, how to build our own identity, how to have some relevance to the field. So we have no dues. Membership is entirely voluntary. We don't do the professional development. We don't put on a conference. There's a separate professional development contract that under the State Bureau of Adult Education that provides all the professional development. There's so much that directors are asked to do in their daily life that it's really hard to get them to engage. So like we're trying to have an annual meeting where we can just recruit new council members and just adopt our bylaws, and we're really having a hard time getting people to show up. You know, we try and do one sort of training or workshop for, you know, for directors a year. We get some participation, but ultimately it's really hard to get that engagement. And so I'm fascinated to see this robust, strong, diverse organization doing so many things for the field. I just have no idea how we could ever get there.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I think, you know, you're in a tough predicament, but it's just small steps. You know, if you can get a little more buy-in here and there, having meetings. Are your meetings and offerings remote or in person? Remote, okay. Maybe try offering them in person, because sometimes those connections you make in person are just key.
So asking directors to come to one more in-person meeting is really challenging. There's so many meetings. I tallied up the hours I spent in meetings in a year, and it adds up to almost 3 weeks of time in meetings separate from this. So I mean, not to be, you know, negative about it. It's just we're trying to, you know, make it easy.
Yep.
You know, reduce the friction, make it as easy as possible. So like tacking on to the state conference was one way. We tried to do it, but then for some reason we weren't allowed to do it for conflict of interest reasons. It was,
hard.
Yeah, it was weird. So, you know, there's some political stuff we have to navigate. You know, what's our role? What's our relationship with the state? What's the state's responsibility, the professional development? You know, it's like, we're still trying to navigate all of that stuff. So, any suggestions you have from anybody in the room, I'd happily take.
I'm sorry that you weren't able to tag on. One of the things we used to do when our state director mandatory meetings were in person is we would have our meeting right after, because that's the only time, you know, and it is really hard to get things scheduled. And keep advocating for it. Coffee before, so maybe you're not.
Yeah, food always helps.
So I've only known Deanna just a matter of months now, and so I'm confused by New Hampshire's setup and organization. And I think part of it, and I'll speak politically a bit, we have a state Board of Education director who homeschooled all of his children. His commitment to public education is sort of challenging now, and we're faced with now sort of a budget crisis where the House wants to cut non-match funding to education by 16%. And we know where that 16% is going to come from.
Yep.
Us. And so looking at that, but one observation, which is you're a nonprofit organization. So you are incorporated and operated under the nonprofit laws. And I think that provides some cachet. So there's some significance to that. And then as that organization built and grew, all of this sort of, you're finding the ways to meet out with the advocates and the communities and all those other things and support them. And I think we're a long way away from that piece of things. Yeah.
Tennessee? You had your hand up before.
We have come full circle doing things similar to that. I mean, from actually being performing the state academies, you know, our conference and stuff like that, and then the state took the back over doing that. But what we have done is try to sponsor some of those, you know, when they have the director meetings and stuff. If you're sponsoring it, they can give you a little say-so. You can go into the back, you know. You have the opportunity at that time to say something. And we start, you know, pulling in, doing our annual meeting and stuff like that, have a half a day during the regular conference. If they can devote that, we sponsor the lunch and be able to do our awards and all that good stuff. So if you can, you know, collaborate, give them a little something, it shows that you can do something. Maybe that way can help. Yes, Stuart was just telling me to remind you all that during that time, we do our Teacher of the Year, Student of the Year, and all that, all the awards and stuff like that. And even down to our commissioner and stuff, they really enjoy that, so they ask us to come back to do that, so.
I was just going to say, I don't know if y'all cover this. I was in another session, and she said, come to this one, so I came over here. Mine finished early. But I don't know if you talked about how COABE, and I don't know that they're still doing it, but I know COABE, we were having trouble getting our website together and trying to find somebody. And Sharon Bonnie and the staff was real gracious and said, as long as you've got less than this many members, which we did at the time because we were struggling. We had a very strong, vibrant state professional organization, very vibrant for decades. And then and we ran the state conference and everything, and we had AAACE and we had COABE come to Tennessee, and then the state was like, no, we're going to go in a different direction. So everything kind of fell apart for a few years, but then we came back together, and like she said, the state's embracing us again.
Good.
But we were like, we need a website. We talked about it, and COABE was very gracious to help us. We would send them material and pictures, and then they created us a website that we're still using today. And it's been very great. And I was going to say, for her trying to establish her state organization again, or for the first time, that might be a good way to kind of start building people together and get some footing on the ground and make a larger presence from there.
It's a good idea. And I do want to put this out there. If there is something that you need from COABE, like if you're like, oh man, it would be great if X, Y, or Z, I know that's pie in the sky, they don't do that, go ahead and ask. Because I can't tell you how many times somebody has come up with an idea and Sharon's thought about it and said, well, let me see, and been able to find some funding and make those connections and those partnerships so that we can get it back out to the field. Really, COABE's priority is making sure that the people who are doing the work have the tools that they need to get it done. So yeah, I can't promise them that right now that they are still doing websites, but I think that if that's something that people want, drop us an email and let's see if we can get it done.
And I just wanted to echo on what she was saying about conflict of interest, because my job is with the professional development system in Pennsylvania. So I'm contracted to provide professional development to all Title II funded adult ed programs. But then here I am on the PACE board, and I'm on I'm a co-administrator chair. So I'm working with the same individuals that I'm working with as my professional development. So I'm pushing out all this PACE stuff, and they're the ones who are attending. But I don't think that I think we're missing a whole other field with the non-Title II funded adult ed programs across the state. We don't have, I don't know if they're in PACE, but I know that whenever we host things, there aren't anybody but the Title II funded agencies that attend, on my end anyways.
And one thing, I don't want to dominate here, I apologize, but I know she said they're not taking in any funding, and we've got our TASE organization, and then we've had at times stronger, like a regional TASE, like West TASE, Mid TASE, East TASE, parts too. And we got, I know Study Buddy, the gentleman was real big in our state and was willing to sponsor our West TASE dinner, and threw in some money to help with the food, and he presented and gave away some Study Buddies, and it was just real neat opportunity. But it was kind of like they gave back to us to help us too. So it was a win for both of us. So she might think about that, to get some sponsors to help her.
All right, thank you. We actually, oh, I'll turn it over to Larry.
So I just want to address a couple of things. Excuse me. As far as corrections go, corrections is part of CASE. However, they are a separate entity beyond adult ed. So under the Department of Education in Connecticut, corrections is its own unit. They're not under adult education. So they participate as best they can. They used to send dozens of their teachers. We provided their PD. Unfortunately, the state, beyond Department of Ed, state structure, I'm still working with corrections for people to get reimbursed for their fees to attend our conference from 2 years ago, because the state drags the fees. So that most of their folks stopped coming because of that. So that's one of the areas we all struggle with in supporting our corrections folks, because I've been to some of their meetings. They have an incredibly dedicated staff who are so innovative. As a program director, if someone came to me and they had corrections on their resume, I hired them on the spot, because they are the most innovative and dynamic teachers, because if they don't keep their audience entertained and engaged, there's problems there. Yep. And the superintendent of corrections is on our board. Just a couple of other things to point out with regards to like having a paid lobbyist. When COVID hit, everything moved online. So every bill, every meeting, everything is online. So all I do now, because our legislature is in session, once a week at a minimum, I go online, I look at the bills, I've read them all now, and looked at, right now there's not much going on that'll impact adult education, but I read them all and I'll flag them to follow more closely if they're going to have a potential impact on adult ed. So, that was one of the good things with COVID. So maybe paying a paid lobbyist, they're not doing much more than that. They're not doing much more than that. And if it's available, yeah, if it's online, it's all there.
Can I say one thing about that? One of the things that I used to like about the paid lobbyist is that they would get to the Capitol first and make sure you were like top of the line to do testimony. But now in Connecticut, we can do it. We can do our testimony in the hearings online. So I gave testimony at 11:30 p.m. A few weeks ago. So I didn't need, it wasn't my favorite time, but I didn't need to wait in in Hartford for 12 hours. So it was doable. I didn't need the lobbyist quite as front and center then. So go ahead.
That's true. Back when I used to give testimony, I would have to
whole
be
day.
there all day. Our lobbyists would get me on there, but I had no clue really when I was going to testify, so I sat there all day. Couple of other things, when you talk about your meetings, invite Burlington English, Aztec, any of those. They'll come in. They sponsor our meetings and they pay for lunch. They'll be happy because, you have to sell it to them. But who's coming to your meetings? Directors. Who has the power of the purse? The directors. So I tell our sponsors, says, hey, you're going to have 20 minutes to address 21 directors who are the individuals that can purchase your product. And we've been doing it now for 2 years. It saved us thousands of dollars because we used to still have lunch, but now it's not coming out of our association funds. And these sponsors that are coming in, we get to learn about what they're doing. We're on the cutting edge of stuff because I don't invite the standard folks. I invite new ideas that are coming forward. And so that helps the association save some money. It also helps inform the directors with regards to what's out there that might be new and innovative for our students. And to go back, COA will support local state associations. So I'm the Sally now, so I meet with that group. But I also meet with a kind of under the table group. We're just called the paid staff group because it's only for individuals who are state association folks who are getting paid. We support each other in what's going on. We share information about what's going on. Sharon put it together, but it's really not Sharon's group. We have our own text message thread. So if I'm looking for something or if I'm struggling, so when we started revamping our strategic plan for CASE, I had no clue what that was about. I reached out to this group and they shared their strategic plans with me so I could look at it and take ideas and bounce our ideas off of them, and we support each other as well. So I think that's a great thing. So COAB will respond. The fact sheets that COAB puts out, well, did you ever ask COAB if you could have the editor rights to your state's fact sheet? We did. I didn't think they'd respond, but you know what? They did. So we now edit ours because we can get more up-to-date information from our state adult education state director. So she worked with me last summer to get our fact sheet, to get the 2024 data on that fact sheet, which the fact sheet that COAB has come from NASDAQ, which is always at least a year behind. I wanted the most up-to-date. And when I asked, they're like, yeah, sure. And now I share it with program directors and say, you take this, take the statewide data on one side of a paper, on the other side, put your local Wallingford data on it so you can share it with your local folks as well to see how you're doing, how the state is doing, and that data becomes great advocacy material for you. So you want to think about, don't be afraid to ask COAB. Like Kristen said, they are there to support us. They give us money toward our conference. They do a lot in support. They market our conference for us through their network. So they do a lot for us. So, sorry.
All right, thank you, Larry. Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Yes, she has a question.
I have 3 questions, actually. But we may not have
You
time
only
for
get
that.
one.
Okay.
No,
With funding on unsure footing, how has that changed or affected your planning as you look forward?
in terms of the state association. Well, we haven't actually had that conversation the way that I feel like you're framing it. But I will say that I feel calmer because of the state association, right? Because I do, there was a little blip that was going on with some issues in my region, and being able to reach out to the state association and all of us talking together about standing together for our learners, right? I feel like that's the important piece. And if it's just my voice saying something, or just the people in my program saying things, then it's going to get tough. But we need to be able to provide that united front, whether it's in Hartford or in our local town, saying, listen, this is a priority, and I know that you're going to cut that money, but we got to think about how we do it in a way that is more respectful of the system. So I guess I'll just say, yeah, we've definitely leaned into helping each other with some of those conversations. But we haven't talked about changing our strategic plan necessarily as a result of that, except increasing advocacy.
My other question is, you said you didn't serve students directly, which is similar to us. How then do you recruit students for your board? Like, how do you get recommendations or?
So we don't have students on our board yet. But we do work closely, like both of these gentlemen do a great job connecting with the directors around the state. And part of what I've been seeing is that people get excited about it, but it's hard to get the momentum going, right? So the first year is just a few students that are coming and speaking, but we're continuing to grow things. I don't know how many, maybe we had 15 learners this year at the conference. And so, but we're using that group to, leveraging that energy, going to continue to invest in them. And then that'll allow us, to continue to, I'm thinking of like, avalanche, snowball, and get the energy up.
Just to add to that, so earlier this winter, spring, whatever you want to call it, starting in February, we did again team up with COAB. We offered a student ambassador program. I was able to get one of, actually it was our current SAFE. She took it on to organize a student ambassador program, and we have 11 students that now, I believe they've all completed and earned their certificate for the student ambassador program. We worked with COAB to revamp it to meet our ability. So part of it was in person, part of it was online. And now, hopefully, through those student ambassadors, one or two of them might be interested in joining our board. But that's one of my meetings, to meet with our lead on that, our SAFE, next week, to see where we're at and where those students, where they're interested and their passion is in advocating for adult ed.
So I will say in terms of finding them, one is Larry does send out a Monday morning minutes. So every Monday something goes out from CASE to all of the directors, and it's literally a few bullet points. But that's one way that we continue to keep the conversation going. And he might say, listen, I'm looking for some students to do this. Like that's a great opportunity. Not heavy on the text. And then we also have a newsletter that's more in depth and that will highlight some of those programs and some of those initiatives and hopefully build energy that way. And the newsletter, is it quarterly? Is it monthly? Monthly, okay. And we're all able to contribute, and so that's another way to make those connections and get people involved. Did I cut you off, Anthony? Okay, no. Did you have another question? Well, thank you all. I know we have another exciting general session planned for us. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Anthony, before we wrapped up?
No, just thank you for coming. I have business cards here if you want to connect more. The presentation is already loaded onto the app. And we'll stick around for a few minutes if anyone has any further questions. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your conference.
Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you.